In North Korea during the early 1990s, bodies of teenagers would begin appearing in Sinpo City. It would quickly become apparent that this was the work of a serial killer, and his crimes were especially brutal. It is said that there have been many serial killers within North Korea. Due to the country's reluctance to share information, details of these serial killers are unknown to the rest of the world. However, this particular killer's methods were so heinous that it was impossible to keep secret. In 1990, a man by the name of Park Hyung-sik discovered he was suffering from liver cirrhosis, which can be brought on by hepatitis or chronic alcoholism. This in turn causes severe scarring. Originally, Park would seek treatment at a nearby hospital, but unfortunately would receive none. This would lead him to seek out a fortune teller. However, North Korea had recently begun cracking down on these types of activities. The punishment for being caught was severe. Luckily enough, Park had a trusted coworker who introduced him to a fortune teller. After the two met, Park would state, "I am suffering from cirrhosis of the liver. I don't know when I will die. Please tell me how to live." The fortune teller told Park to return in a few days, which he did. By this point, the fortune teller informed Park that the only way to cure his illness was to eat human livers, more specifically the liver of a young person. Park would return home, letting the words of the fortune teller sink in. Initially, he decided against this, not wanting to take human life. Later statements would reveal that he was worried he would hurt someone. That is, until his condition grew worse and worse. By this time, his eyes were being affected. Park decided that if he was going to die, he might as well die trying the advice of the fortune teller. Around this point, he would begin devising plans on how to murder someone. And with that, he would target middle and high school students. During springtime, Park would visit lodges where groups of students were staying to work. In these parts, the work is long and labor-intensive. Due to exhaustion, the students would quickly fall asleep after dinner. One night at around 11 p.m., Park would break into the lodge, cover a student's mouth, and then stab him in a vital area. As blood poured from the wound, Mr. Park would carry the student outside into the yard. However, the barking of nearby dogs would alert others of his presence, causing him to flee. The student would lie in that same spot, bleeding out until he was found dead the next morning. Despite the bloody scene, North Korean officials would be unable to gather any evidence leading them to a suspect. And with that, public agitation would grow day by day. A few days later, Mr. Park would do so again with another student at a farm. With this student, it would be approximately 4 kilometers away from his first victim. The exact details of what happened are unclear, but Mr. Park would be successful this time. He would cut open the victim's abdomen, remove the liver, and then eat it. A farm worker who discovered the scene is said to have fainted from how mutilated the body was. Even after consuming the liver, Mr. Park's grisly killing spree unfortunately wouldn't stop here. He would go on to murder a woman in her 20s, also cutting open her abdomen and removing her liver to consume. After this, he would take the lives of 11 more victims around the city. Like with his first 2 victims, he would slice open their abdomens, remove their livers, and then consume them. Around this time, citizens of Sinpo City became terrified of even leaving their homes at night. With a trail of bodies, the local police soon began an investigation. However, they were unsuccessful in uncovering any clues leading to a suspect. That is, until October, when Mr. Park attempted to strike again on another student. He pulled out a weapon, trying to kidnap her. Luckily, the student resisted, screaming and shouting. Nearby neighbors and residents who heard the scuffle quickly ran after Mr. Park, subduing him. Mr. Park was soon turned over to the police. After interrogating him, they learned of the fortune teller who told him to eat the liver. He too was apprehended. In October of 1991, the Sinpo City's People Court would hold the murder trial of Mr. Park. After admitting to the crimes, he would then be sentenced to death. Soon after that, he would be publicly executed by firing squad. Before going to the fortune teller, Mr. Park was described as timid and quiet. Co-workers would state that they had never heard a single person say something bad about him. The fortune teller too would be put on trial. It was there that he would argue that he simply told Mr. Park to eat the human livers, never to actually kill anyone. Despite his plea, he was given 15 years of hard labor. According to sources, he was shunned even amongst other inmates. The same sources state that it is highly likely that he was either beaten to death or died of starvation. According to official reports from North Korea, this is the only case of a serial killer in the country's history. However, other reports show that this is far from the truth. In 2013, 3 infants were brutally murdered, all having their blood completely drained from their bodies. Given the country's history of repeated attempts to paint the country as a paradise, it is not far-fetched to assume that Mr. Park was not the only serial killer. In fact, it is hard to believe that multiple serial killers have not emerged from the horrific conditions of poverty, barbaric treatment, and starvation. Unfortunately for the outside world, North Korea is very secretive about what goes on within its borders, so we will never know what truly horrific things have occurred in the country. With that being said, the case of Mr. Park was so brutal that North Korea was unable to cover it up. It eventually spread to South Korea and from there to the rest of the world. And from this point, Mr. Park would forever be known as the organ harvester.